Emily stared at the glowing screen as her inbox delivered one more message she never wanted to open. The engagement party budget scrolled past her eyes, each number sharper than the last as the total reached absurd heights. Her name never appeared on the guest list, a quiet omission that hit harder than any insult her family had spoken aloud. For a moment she wondered if it was a mistake, but the silence around her felt too familiar and too intentional. 20 years of giving had trained her to accept anything, yet something in her chest burned hotter than fear. The room stayed still as she realized the truth. She had paid for a celebration she was never meant to enter. Emily was 12 when her mother married Frank, a man whose footsteps ruled the house. He never raised his voice, yet every sentence he spoke carried a quiet threat. Emily learned to read danger in the angle of his smile and the weight of his stare. Her mother insisted he was simply strict, a man who valued order above everything else. Emily knew better, but she also knew silence was the safest answer. Alyssa was 6 then, soft-voiced and adored, drifting through the home like a fragile ornament. Frank treated her like a treasure, lifting her gently, praising her endlessly, protecting her fiercely. Emily received none of that softness, only the sharpness reserved for the inconvenient child. She felt eyes on her constantly, measuring every step, every breath, every hesitation. Frank corrected her posture, corrected her tone, corrected her existence with subtle precision. He touched her shoulder too firmly, not enough to bruise, but enough to warn. Emily began to shrink herself. Hopping smaller movements meant fewer reasons for punishment. Meals were quiet performances, where she tried to disappear behind her plate. Frank watched her like she was a problem he intended to solve permanently. Her mother never interfered, always pretending she did not notice the tension in the room. Emily wondered if love made adults blind or simply unwilling to acknowledge discomfort. Alyssa laughed and chattered, unaware of the storm that hovered around Emily alone. Frank bought Alyssa toys and dresses, while Emily received lectures about responsibility. He framed every small cruelty as guidance, claiming she needed discipline to mature properly. Emily stopped arguing because every word she spoke was twisted into a flaw. She stayed in her room whenever possible, the one space where she could breathe freely. Even there, she felt the echo of Frank's control pressing against the walls. He entered without knocking, inventing reasons to check on her and comment on her behavior. Emily hid her drawings after he called them childish and a waste of time. She hid her books when he accused her of escaping reality instead of improving herself. She learned to keep her face blank, a neutral surface that revealed nothing dangerous. Frank praised Alyssa for expressing herself, then scolded Emily for showing too much emotion. The contrast carved a quiet ache into her chest that never fully healed. School became her only sanctuary, a place where no one monitored her every movement. But even at school, she carried fear inside her like a second heartbeat. She hurried home each afternoon, knowing being late would invite suspicion and punishment. Her mother greeted Alyssa with affection, while offering Emily a tired, distracted smile. Emily felt like a guest in her own family, tolerated but never truly welcomed. The years passed slowly, each one tightening the invisible leash around her life. Frank's rules grew stricter, and Emily adapted because she saw no other path forward. By 14, she could predict his moods before he entered the room. By 15, she could silence herself completely on command. By 16, she no longer remembered what it felt like to relax around another person. Her childhood ended not in a single moment, but in 1,000 quiet surrenders. Emily got her first job at 16, stacking shelves in a small grocery store after school. She loved the quiet aisles because no one hovered behind her to judge every movement. When she received her first paycheck, she stared at the envelope with a spark of pride. For a moment, she imagined buying new shoes or a notebook or anything that felt like hers. Frank waited in the kitchen that evening with a smile too calm to trust. He asked for the envelope, before she had a chance to explain her plans. Her mother stood beside him, nodding as if the decision had been discussed beforehand. They said families share everything, and contributing was simply part of growing up. Emily handed it over even though her fingers tightened around the paper. The money disappeared without acknowledgement, swallowed into the household as if she owed it. Alyssa received a new ballet outfit the next week, silk soft and pastel blue. Emily recognized the store logo on the tag and felt her stomach tighten. Frank praised Alyssa for her dedication, while ignoring the hours Emily had spent working. He told Emily she should be proud her hard work supported her sister's dreams. Every shift she worked after that carried the weight of obligation instead of independence. Her paychecks went directly into Frank's hands, sometimes before she even opened them. He said managing money was stressful, and she should be grateful he handled it for her. Her mother agreed softly, avoiding Emily's eyes as the envelopes kept vanishing. Emily continued buying nothing for herself, afraid that wanting anything was selfish. She wore sneakers with thinning soles and sweaters faded from years of washing. Meanwhile, Alyssa's room filled with costumes, decorative lights, and matching accessories. Emily told herself it didn't matter, but the lie sat heavy in her chest. At school, she copied notes quietly because she couldn't afford new notebooks. Teachers assumed her silence came from shyness, not the constant drain of responsibility. When friends invited her to movies, she declined because she had no spare money. Frank claimed the family needed every dollar, yet the demands always centered on Alyssa. He justified each request with calm logic that left Emily feeling unreasonable for resisting. She tried once to keep a small portion of her earnings hidden in a drawer. Frank found it within days, holding the bills like evidence of betrayal. He lectured her for an hour about trust and loyalty, while her mother watched silently. Emily apologized, even though she wasn't sure what crime she had committed. After that, she stopped imagining a life where money belonged to her. Frank increased her chores and insisted employment built character, not comfort. He treated Alyssa like a fragile gem, while treating Emily like a resource. Every family outing became another reminder that Emily was expected to give, not receive. She drove Alyssa to rehearsals, paid for snacks, and waited in the parking lot. Frank never asked if she was tired because her exhaustion did not matter. Emily learned to calculate bills in her head, mapping every dollar she earned and lost. The pattern became routine, a cycle she accepted because she saw no escape. By 17, she had stopped dreaming about college dorms or part-time freedom. She worked, she handed over her pay, and she survived inside a life that wasn't hers. The world saw her as a responsible teenager, but she felt like a machine fueled by fear. She wondered if adulthood would be different, not yet understanding the cycle had only begun. Emily earned a full scholarship to a prestigious university, a rare victory in her life. She expected freedom, independence, and a chance to escape the constant control at home. Her mother and Frank refused to let her live in the dorms, claiming safety concerns. Emily spent 4 hours on the bus each way, a silent prisoner of her own success. Every morning she woke before dawn, clutching her backpack, hoping no one noticed her struggle. Her professors praised her dedication, unaware she traveled 8 hours a day just to attend class. After graduation, she landed a well-paying job, her first real taste of financial autonomy. She thought she could finally breathe, finally make choices for herself. But the phone calls started immediately, subtle at first, then relentless. Frank needed a new laptop for Alyssa. Her mother wanted funds for Alyssa's art class and travel expenses to a summer program. Emily sent money, every transaction a silent reminder she was trapped in invisible chains. She tried to refuse once, explaining she had bills, responsibilities, and dreams of her own. Frank's voice became icy, layered with disappointment and accusation. Her mother stayed quiet, the walls of silence stronger than any argument. Emily felt panic rise, guilt weighing heavier than her own needs. Every deposit she made to her sister's accounts felt like signing away another piece of herself. She lived in her own apartment, yet her life was not her own. She cooked for herself, washed her clothes, but still carried the financial burdens of a family that treated her as an ATM. Her coworkers envied her discipline, her ability to balance work and school. They did not know she calculated expenses for another household, often sacrificing meals to cover Alyssa's desires. Her bank statements became a diary of sacrifice, each line item a silent scream for recognition. Frank found excuses for every demand, claiming Emily was lucky to have a family who needed her. Alyssa never asked directly, but her needs were always highlighted, always prioritized. Emily missed deadlines at work because she stayed up late paying bills and coordinating trips. She stopped accepting invitations, stopped allowing herself small joys, stopped dreaming for herself. Every text from her mother or Frank carried the same unspoken rule: Emily exists to provide. Her identity outside the family diminished slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. She became a ghost in her own life, present physically but absent emotionally. Her apartment was tidy, but every dollar spent was calculated, weighed against her family's expectations. She hoped independence would feel like air in her lungs, but it felt like chains. Even vacations required approval, even purchases sparked guilt. She wanted to buy a car, a gift for herself, but hesitated. Frank would ask, and she knew she could not say no. Alyssa's requests grew bolder, her independence shielded by Emily's fear of confrontation. Emily fantasized about telling them no, about keeping her earnings, but the thought terrified her. The years blurred together, a cycle of earning, sending, and apologizing for wanting more. She was a woman in her 20s, yet the pattern of her teenage years ruled her. She considered moving farther away, cutting all ties, but guilt and fear anchored her in place. Every achievement outside the house felt hollow, because it immediately funneled back to family demands. Her life was a continuous compromise, a constant negotiation where her desires were irrelevant. Emily realized she had learned obedience, submission, and self-denial so thoroughly she barely remembered who she was. The cycle was relentless, and she understood then that graduation had not freed her, it had only expanded the prison. Each paycheck became another link in the chain, each sacrifice another brick in walls she built herself. Emily wondered if adulthood would ever mean autonomy, or if giving had become her identity forever. Emily turned 30 and felt the weight of 2 decades pressing down on her shoulders. Every paycheck she earned was claimed before she could consider saving a single dollar. Frank continued his subtle manipulations, finding new ways to criticize and control. Her mother remained silent, nodding along to his demands while avoiding Emily's eyes. Alyssa had grown into a confident young woman who expected Emily's support without question. Every new desire Alyssa expressed became an obligation for Emily to fulfill immediately. Luxury vacations, designer clothes, expensive gadgets, all flowed from Emily's hard work. Emily's own aspirations had taken a backseat to maintaining her family's comfort. She tried dating, but relationships faltered under the weight of her financial entanglements. Partners struggled to understand why she couldn't save, why she always deferred to family needs. Frank subtly sabotaged her independence, offering advice that masked control as concern. Her mother's silence reinforced Emily's guilt, suggesting she was selfish for resisting. Emily bought a new car for Alyssa, even though her old one barely functioned. She repaired appliances in the house to save costs while neglecting her own apartment. Medical bills, tuition payments, travel fees, Emily covered it all without complaint. Every dollar she earned became a lifeline for others, not a tool for her own freedom. She felt trapped in an invisible contract, bound by fear, obligation, and habit. Alyssa never acknowledged Emily's sacrifices, taking them for granted entirely. Emily's apartment felt empty, a quiet space overshadowed by endless responsibilities. She stopped entertaining thoughts of career advancement because promotions meant more money to give away. Every raise or bonus triggered anxiety instead of celebration, knowing it would be redirected. Frank continued his microaggressions, criticizing her choices, her friends, even her wardrobe. Emily adapted silently, mastering the art of appearing compliant while internally exhausted. Her mother's passive complicity reinforced the notion that Emily's needs were secondary. Family emergencies, real or fabricated, became routines she was expected to solve. She began to lose track of what she wanted, what she needed, and who she really was. Social outings became rare because Emily felt guilty spending on herself. Holidays and birthdays for Emily were minimal, often sacrificed for Alyssa's experiences. She dreamed of moving, traveling, and exploring, yet the thought of abandoning family terrified her. Her sense of self-worth became entangled with her ability to provide endlessly. Emily recognized patterns she had once ignored, the subtle coercion, the emotional blackmail. Every request came cloaked in politeness, obligation, or expectation, making refusal nearly impossible. She started tracking expenses obsessively, trying to understand the scope of her giving. Alyssa's reliance on her became a constant reminder of how entrenched the cycle had grown. Even when alone, Emily felt tethered to the demands and unspoken rules of the household. Her health suffered from stress, fatigue, and lack of personal care. She realized that financial dependence was only one layer. Emotional control persisted equally. Emily wanted freedom but feared confrontation, the disruption of family dynamics, and backlash. Every day she balanced between resentment, fear, and a faint hope for eventual independence. The patterns of her childhood had solidified into adulthood, a cycle she could not escape. Emily understood then that her life was not hers, yet she had endured so long she barely recognized the chains. She questioned if she would ever break free or remain the family's source of endless provision forever. A quiet despair settled over her, thick and persistent, as she contemplated the decades of unseen labor. Emily opened the email and froze as the numbers stared back at her. Alyssa's engagement party would cost $37,000, all expected from her. The details were meticulous, every catering item, floral arrangement, and venue fee listed. Emily scrolled down, searching for a mistake, a missing line, any hint she was not responsible. Her heart sank when she reached the guest list. Her name was nowhere to be found. She stared at the screen, unable to blink, unable to think past the betrayal. All those years of sacrifice, all the money she had sent, vanished in an instant. The party was for her sister, her parents, her family, but not for her. Emily realized she had been funding a celebration she would never attend. The room seemed to shrink around her, her chest tight with disbelief. She remembered the countless hours she worked, the paychecks she handed over without question. Every laptop, every class, every vacation, every expense she covered now felt meaningless. Her hands shook as she reopened the spreadsheet she kept of family spending. The totals blurred, but she knew she had given hundreds of thousands over the years. She recalled the silent dinners, the whispered lectures, the careful navigation of Frank's moods. Alyssa had grown up shielded, supported, and spoiled by her labor, unaware of the weight she imposed. Her mother said nothing, only watched Emily react, her silence louder than any words. Emily thought of the patterns that had ruled her life: obedience, guilt, and financial surrender. She thought of the moments she had denied herself joy, savings, and independence. Every dollar she earned was claimed, every wish she held for herself postponed indefinitely. The realization hit hard. She was never a sister, never a daughter, just a source of money. Alyssa's joy was built on the erasure of Emily's presence and sacrifice. Emily felt anger, but it was mixed with sadness, with exhaustion, with a sudden clarity. This was not just a family expectation. It was a systematic pattern of exploitation. The betrayal cut deeper than any word, any criticism, any subtle threat from Frank. She remembered every family emergency, every expense redirected to Alyssa, every silent allowance from her mother. It all converged in this single moment, crystal clear. She could no longer ignore the truth. She had been used. Emily leaned back in her chair, her mind racing through decades of giving and silence. She felt the familiar pang of guilt at even thinking of refusing, yet the betrayal fueled a new fire. This was not simply unfair. It was a wake-up call, a mirror held to her life. She thought of the future, of every sacrifice yet to be made if she continued. Every party, every purchase, every demand would continue if she stayed silent. The screen glowed, reflecting the tears in her eyes, but also a spark of resolve. Emily understood that this moment marked a turning point. She could continue as she always had, or she could finally act for herself. The guest list, blank of her name, became a symbol of everything she had endured. It also became a symbol of the choice she had now, to reclaim her presence and power. Her chest tightened, but not with fear this time. It was a mix of grief and determination, a strange clarity she had never known. Emily realized she had allowed herself to be invisible for too long. She understood the truth. She would no longer be just a provider, a shadow, a ghost in her own family. The betrayal of this party lit the first spark of rebellion she had felt in decades. Her mind raced, forming plans, imagining consequences, imagining freedom. Emily knew the road ahead would be difficult, but she also knew she had finally seen the full picture. She took a deep breath, her fingers hovering over the keyboard, ready to confront the reality she had ignored for 20 years. Emily sat down with a notebook and began recording every transaction from the past 20 years. Each line brought a new wave of disbelief at how much she had given. $300,000 in total, traced and documented with meticulous care. She listed every laptop, every car payment, every class, every trip she had financed. Her hands shook, but her mind felt sharper than it had in decades. She realized she had been complicit only out of habit, fear, and misplaced loyalty. Every deposit she had made was a thread in the web that bound her to her family. Emily began to notice patterns she had never clearly seen before. Frank never asked, he assumed. Her mother never interfered, she silently approved. Alyssa never thanked her, she simply took and expected more. Emily felt a cold clarity settle over her. She was done being invisible. She reviewed the engagement contract carefully, noting a clause that allowed cancellation within 72 hours. Her pulse quickened. For the first time, she saw a real opening, a loophole to reclaim her autonomy. Emily started drafting what she quietly called her exit strategy. Every financial obligation would be reviewed, every payment reconsidered. She planned which deposits could be halted and which contracts could be legally reversed. No one suspected she had begun this careful calculation. She continued to make temporary payments to avoid raising alarm. Meanwhile, she prepared the groundwork to regain control. Every document, every receipt, every agreement was cataloged and stored. She researched laws, contracts, and cancellation policies with precision. Emily felt a surge of empowerment she had not felt since childhood. This was not impulsive anger. It was calculated, deliberate, and patient. She imagined telling Frank and her mother nothing until she was ready. Alyssa would discover the shift only when it was irreversible. Emily realized she had spent decades giving away her life. Now she would take it back, piece by piece. She marked each item she could contest, each sum she could reclaim. The notebook became a blueprint for freedom, a map out of 2 decades of control. She planned the timing carefully, ensuring she could exit without immediate retaliation. Her savings, once drained, would now be reclaimed for her own future. Emily wrote down emotional triggers she expected, ways Frank might manipulate her still. She rehearsed responses in her mind, steadying herself for confrontation. Every plan was precise, legal, and irreversible once set in motion. She felt strength growing in the recognition that she had power all along. For 20 years, she had been trained to obey, to give, to disappear. Now she understood the rules, and she intended to break them all. Emily allowed herself a small smile, imagining the first day she would live entirely for herself. She felt a sense of liberation already, just in the act of planning. No more silent sacrifices, no more invisible labor. Every dollar, every choice, every moment would belong to her. She visualized the moment she would send the cancellation notices, watching the old control crumble. Her heart raced with anticipation and fear, but she felt ready. Emily realized she was no longer the scared girl who had handed over her first paycheck. She was a strategist, a planner, and soon, a woman fully in control of her own life. The notebook lay open, filled with figures, dates, and a clear path to freedom. For the first time, Emily smiled without guilt. The decades of exploitation were ending. She had her plan, her tools, and her resolve. And for the first time, she felt the weight lift, knowing she would reclaim her life entirely. Emily sat before her laptop, fingers hovering over the keyboard. The guest list for Alyssa's engagement party glowed on the screen. She had erased every name except one, the cursor blinking steadily. Her heart pounded with a mix of fear, relief, and determination. For the first time in 20 years, she felt the weight lift from her shoulders. She typed her own name, Emily Carter. A single entry, yet it carried the power of decades of lost autonomy. She leaned back, letting the silence of her apartment absorb the triumph. No one would control her finances, dictate her choices, or erase her presence again. The chains of obligation and guilt were gone, replaced by her own plan and resolve. Her mind raced with possibilities she had never dared imagine. She could spend money on herself, pursue dreams, and live without apology. For the first time, she was truly seen, fully present in her own life. Emily smiled, a slow, steady smile that reached her eyes for the first time in years. The laptop screen reflected her liberation, a symbol of control regained. She knew challenges remained, but she faced them armed with clarity and purpose. The decades of silent suffering had ended. Emily had chosen herself, and nothing could take that away. She closed her eyes briefly, breathing deeply, feeling the freedom she had longed for. When she opened them, she was ready to step fully into the life she had earned.